Well, it's thinking. There we go.
I should probably share it once we are live in my Facebook feed. I would suggest
It says
everyone
we're
does the
live.
same.
Yeah, we're live. All right. Hi. How's it on the panel?
Looking good.
All right. Well, we're going to launch into a Couch Potatoes Unite episode, and this is how we launch. It goes like this. Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of the podcast entitled Couch Potatoes Unite! Exclamation point, which is based on a blog of the same name because couch potatoes who are united and not in crisis can be a strong presence on any number of infinite formats. I think that made sense. My name is Kylie, and I love TV. If you feel the same, keep listening and or checking out our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, as you're bound to find some common ground or something you like. For Couch Potatoes Unite, we're all about the wonders and unique long-form storytelling of the small screen. Our podcast episodes are published every Wednesday. Sometimes blog posts are published Tuesdays. Subscribe to us via Apple Podcasts and iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play, Spotify, and YouTube, as well as directly at our website. Each podcast episode features a panel of 3 to 7 participants, including a moderator. Let's face it, that's usually me. On the water cooler and talking about our favorite TV shows and sometimes movies if the mood strikes us. It's not about extensive recapping and hyper-analysis. It's about our reactions as fans of a hardcore to casual type, or perhaps not so fans of any show that catches our fancy would be. And we watch a lot of TV. Episodes already published discuss a variety of shows, from drama to comedy, from straightforward to science fiction and fantasy, from superhero to arch villain. Today we're coming to you live streamed from Grand Rapids, Michigan. This is one of our CPU live podcasts, sort of. Well, normally we love an interactive audience, but you might have heard of the global pandemic thing and the need to quarantine, so that forces us to keep socially distant. Fortunately, we have Facebook, which can help us with some live interaction. Don't be shy, listeners and watchers. We'd love if you commented and reacted. We're monitoring those reactions, so please say hello. We love to see you. This is our second attempt at one of our live streams of one of our normal water cooler panels. We think we've improved quite a bit since the last time when we tried to live stream from a bunker. You might remember that, our Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt episode. If for any reason we cut out, let us know and we'll restore it as lickety-split as we can because we've got the technological know-how. And if you didn't already know, CPU is a podcast by the people for the people. We are always adding new and old shows to chat about around the water cooler, and we love it when people say hi. They have, and we hope you'll continue to do so. We create new panels all the time filled with people just like you at home, and it's easy to talk about TV. So if you ever want to be part of a friendly podcast and talk about shows about which you're passionate, or even to suggest shows we ought to cover, get in contact with us. Drop us a line, let us know how you're doing and how we're doing. We can take it. Sometimes. Today, our Dctu panel is back around the water cooler for one of its special bonus episodes in which we're going to chat about the mega crossover event, Crisis on Infinite Earths. It was 5 episodes, and the cast of Arrow, The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, Supergirl, and Batwoman combined to form a super friend salad of heroic proportions. Today, your friendly neighborhood Dctu panel, that's the wrong universe, namely Kyle, Hillary, Spencer, Kristen, and Nick, who you all see around the water cooler of Zoom right now, are here to discuss that crossover, which began on December 8th, 2019 during a specially scheduled episode of Supergirl, and which concluded on January 14th, 2020 with a regularly scheduled episode of Legends of Tomorrow on the CW. Crisis on Infinite Earths, inspired by the comic of the same name, continues plot lines established in the previous crossover called Elseworlds. The preceding episodes of Arrow Season 8 and much of The Flash Season 6 are a prelude to the crossover. In Crisis, the Monitor, played by LaMonica Garrett, gathers Green Arrow, played by Stephen Amell, The Flash, played by Grant Gustin, Supergirl, played by Melissa Benoist, Batwoman, played by Ruby Rose, Sarah Lance, played by Katie Lotz, Ray Palmer, played by Brandon Routh, and several others from throughout the multiverse to stop the Anti-Monitor, also played by LaMonica Garrett, from destroying reality. Initial references to the crossover began in 2014 with the pilot episode of The Flash. The adaptation began in earnest during the development of Elseworlds, and the crossover's title was revealed at the end of Elseworlds in December 2018. And The casting started in mid-2019 and included a whole bunch of actors who've previously portrayed DC characters, which we'll talk about today. Crisis on Infinite Earths was critically praised for its scope, ambition, and many cameos. The Fate of Oliver Queen, which we will discuss, had a mixed reception. The crossover was popular, with each episode giving season-high ratings to its corresponding series, and a 2-episode after-show, Crisis Aftermath, hosted by Kevin Smith, aired after parts 1 and 3 to explore the crossover's events. Today, for the 23rd episode of our Dctu series, our Dctu panel returns to talk specifically about this Crisis on Infinite Earths live, as all 5 panelists prove particularly Twitter-pated to chat about this latest network crossover event, and separately from the main season discussions, which we actually did not do a mid-season roundup this year because of the change-up at the CW. We have a shortened Arrow final season, the introduction of Batwoman, and we want to give that a whole season before we review it. And then we're actually a big announcement because of Black Lightning. If you followed the miniseries, that is now part of the Arrowverse, and we're going to be covering that show too, so we have to catch up. So, as always, it should be noted that every single one of our panelists has viewed all of the Arrowverse shows, maybe not Black Lightning, at least up Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is important because there are some seeding details spilled over from the seasons proper, and we'll likely discuss sensitive plot points. So for those of you who are not caught up on Arrow, The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, Supergirl, or Batwoman, at least through Crisis on Infinite Earths, listen at your own risk, and it will be risky because we are going to be talking about major spoilers. Welcome back, panel. How are you?
Doing good.
Great.
I mean, apart from the whole global pandemic thing, anyway.
Right. Yeah, I mean, other than the usual quarantine business, but you know.
Some might call it a crisis.
What? Some might call it that. Maybe that's why we're doing this crisis.
How did you put that together?
I produced this thing?
Genius.
I guess. Well, before we get too far in our discussion, we do something a little bit different for these crossover episodes when we do this podcast. I'm going to have the panel introduce themselves. Anybody watching this probably knows who they are, but we have a special sort of system that we use for the crossover event. Normally we have a standard CPU character question, which changes with each show we do. However, I don't put that character question out for these crossovers because A, there's like 500 characters, and B, Crisis on Infinite Earths had like 500 million characters, so we're not doing that. What we are going to do, however, is introduce everybody. You're going to tell them your name, again, even though it's in the little corner of the screens of each of you. And you are going to talk about how you came to the Dctu panel. And you're going to rate your reaction to Crisis on Infinite Earths, which I'll get to in a second. And then after that rating, what I want you to do, and I'm reading the rating scale after this so that you can think about your answer to this question. No, in telling us about yourself, if you were to be any hero in any Earth of the multiverse prior to its collapse, who would you be and why? Kyle, you have to verbalize it later. Okay. So think about the answer to that question. In the meantime, how would you rate your reaction to Crisis on Infinite Earths, one of a series of crossovers of the Arrowverse shows? Would you rate it 5 stars? Holy smokes! This is the best crossover ever! And they've had a lot, so maybe. Is it 4 stars? It was intriguing. Please make more CW/producers of the Arrowverse shows. You get better each time, though maybe you're not perfect yet. Is it 3 stars? It was fine. It was okay. It was not really special. There were parts you liked and parts you didn't, and you're going to explain what those were. Is it 2 stars? You were bored. No, it was a nice idea, but the execution left something to be desired. Or is it 1 star? Not your best, Arrowverse. Pass. Stop trying, especially now that Oliver Queen is gone. Spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. Who would like to start?
Not you, Nick.
No.
I mean, this is unedited, guys.
Well, we're thinking about our characters now.
Oh.
So you need to fill. Do
You
a
know
dance or
what?
something?
You know what? I'll just
I'm
start.
wearing the Flash t-shirt. That's it.
Can we say our t-shirts?
He's back there somewhere. There he
DC
is.
Superman shirt.
All right.
I'll just start.
Okay.
I am Hillary, as the screen says.
Hi, Hillary.
You're not
as the
Kyle?
screen
Oh.
says.
Oh, well, we'll get to that.
Yeah, you're Kyle, as the screen says. He's Hillary.
Got off the rails.
Already. Didn't take long. If you've listened to a lot of our other, Kyle and I appear frequently. He is my husband. So there's, he'll talk in a second here. So there's lots of that element, some marital jokes going back and forth, and that's why that is. Also, Kylie over there talking is my sister, so sometimes there's some family jokes in there. Usually we disclaim it in our regular podcast, but for those who are listening who may not know that, just a little refresher for you.
Dynamics / hashtag Hillary's disclaimer.
Yes. When we started watching DC, is that what we're talking about now?
How you came to the Dctu shows, the Arrowverse shows.
So again, if you've listened to the other podcasts, Kyle and I are pretty nerdy people. We are big comic book people. We go to a lot of cons. We were already aware of Arrow happening, and of course, everything went along with Arrow as the Arrowverse grew on the CW. We were always going to watch those shows because we enjoy that type of content. And I think we were part of the group of people that suggested us doing the podcast in the beginning, if I remember correctly.
You did encourage it highly, yes.
Yes. We were really excited about the show and how it was going to expand into the other shows. So I think that pretty much sums up why we started to watch, would you say?
I mean, yeah, we pretty much launched straight from Smallville into Arrow, like most DC fans that are TV watchers. It was literally one ended and one began, and we just kept going.
So yeah. And then is it the character? Oh, do I have to rate it now?
Whichever one you want to do. You just got to do both.
All right. I would say as far as these crossovers go for me, it was a solid 3. And I will get into the reasons as to why that is the case. While Crisis on Infinite Earths is a huge DC story that most people are pretty familiar with. And obviously they had some aspects that maybe set it back in terms of obviously budget and whatnot. I think there are some things that they did that drew too much from other things. I did think, though, that they found a good way to kind of condense the story because it's a pretty big story that they had to do in only a few episodes. But we'll get into that more. So again, I'm going to land on a solid 3. In terms of the character in the universe, I want to just say I just love Barry, so I want to be Barry. I think in a lot of ways, he's a lot of the aspects and characteristics that I admire. And I find myself endeared to him even after all these seasons, even with the writing maybe having gone down a little bit. So I'm going to stick with Barry.
All right. Welcome back, Hillary, my sister.
And as she said, I'm Kyle. I'm her husband.
Hi, Kyle. I'm her husband.
Hello. And she pretty much said how we started. I mean, we were both comic book fans, nerds from the beginning, so we were always going to watch these shows no matter what. And we just went straight from Smallville right into the Arrow universe. And then as it expanded, each show just got added into it. As for the rating, I have a hard time with that. There's so many moving parts. There's things I would give 5 and things I would give a 1.
That's why I landed on a 3.
Yeah, I'm probably going to land somewhere on a 3 too. Anything with Brandon Routh is a solid 5. And then I have quibbles with some of the story points and creative decisions, which we'll get into. And as for DC characters, Jay Garrick, I absolutely love the Flash and the entire Flash mythology. And so he is the OG Flash, Silver Age, technically Golden Age. And I love that character, and I love the way they introduced him onto the show. I thought it was really unique. First, we got the evil version, and then we got the actual real version. And I just love that character, and I was actually bummed he didn't show up anywhere here. We just got the 90s TV show Flash instead.
Which was kind of fun in itself.
Yeah, that was cool. And as someone who watched that show, I love that, but I still love him playing Jay Garrick so much.
All right. Welcome back, Kyle. Yeah.
I can go next.
All right.
Oh, that's how this works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Nick.
Hi.
The other
Nick.
way.
And I came to join this panel after it already started. I jumped in late because I was resistant to watch these shows, but I was on the Marvel one panels, and you guys kept talking about it. So eventually, when I was looking for something new to watch, I started Arrow and Flash, and I eventually got really into it. And I think I begged to join because it might have been supersized at the time.
No, you
No.
slot.
Oh.
I don't know.
That seems like 17 years ago, so I don't really remember.
Approximately, sure.
Give or take 10, 12 years.
Right.
And I think the character, this is not going to be original, but I think I'd have to go with the Flash. I like the character, Barry Allen, and I really don't know that much about the DC world except for like Batman the animated series. So the Flash kind of stands out as my favorite in this universe, and also just from a power standpoint, Speedsters seems like an awesome power to have. Also, the healing really fast and all that is good too. And then my rating it's a 3 for me. It's a balance out of things I really like, things that were meh, and I think overall it was a 3.
Okay. Welcome back, Nick.
Thanks.
All right, I'll go next, as that seems to be the way things are happening. I'm Spencer, the token Brit.
Hi, Spencer,
and
the token Brit.
I actually enjoyed the first half of this crossover so much more than the back end of the crossover. The first half was a solid 4. The back half was a 2 in many parts of it. So I end up with a round 3, pretty much like everybody else. If I came to watch the DC universe because I was a huge fan of Smallville, and when that was coming to a close, I saw Arrow was coming, and like Kyle and Hillary, I jumped on it immediately and watched it weekly from when it started. I used to watch it with my sons and just really enjoyed it. And then it spawned all these other shows. And then I met Kylie doing theater, and I saw that she had this, and I asked, well, she put out a feelers, I think, for Arrow, and I said, oh, I'd love to do that. And here I am, 6, 7, 8, 9 years later, and I've
Approximately
17.
like 12 different pods now. So yeah, as far as the superhero I would pick, I am actually going to pick the Smallville Clark Kent who gave up his powers but then punched out Lex Luthor. That was my favorite moment of the entire crossover.
All right. Welcome back, Spencer.
Thanks.
Okay, so I guess that leaves me. Hi, I'm Kristen.
Hi, Kristen.
Kylie. I am the latest addition to the Dctu panel.
Actually, Nick was last.
Was he last?
Yeah, you slid in there just before he did.
Okay. I didn't, yeah,
It's all a blur.
well, you know.
Like the
Yeah, so I was on the Marvel panel because I fell in love with Jessica Jones, and so I decided, yeah, I'll jump on that panel. And then you guys needed to fill an opening. Someone had left from the Dctu panel, so I said, I'll join. I've never watched any of these shows, and I've got like 3 seasons to catch up on, and I did it
Each.
and I did it in record time and watched it in the order everything actually aired. So I would jump back between, what was it, like Arrow season 1 as a whole, and then Arrow and Flash together, and then Supergirl ended up getting in there. Yeah, it was complicated. I had a huge note on my phone from Wikipedia of which order to watch it in, because I've gotten a lot of crap for not watching shows in the order that they're released.
Have only done this with the Marvel universe.
Right? Listen,
This
you
is
guys
tradition, but the Marvel series is done.
got a lot. I'm also the only non-comic book reader here, so I'm kind of coming in as
Nick's like, I'm in that boat.
you guys know more about this universe than I do. I don't know a lot. I'm just a casual watcher. So I didn't know any of the Easter eggs. So I learned a lot by watching the Kevin Smith specials after the episodes were done, and also just reading news articles after I watched the episodes. I'm like, I had no idea that all of these extra people were in it. I didn't watch Smallville. It's still on my to watch list, so maybe during quarantine I'll actually get to it. Yeah, so total comic book noob over here. That being said, if I could be any character in this universe, I'd go with Caitlin, aka Killer Frost. She's always been my favorite since day one. I'm repping Star Labs with my background. I've got a Star Labs t-shirt on today. Love Caitlin. I hate the winter. I hate ice and snow, so picking Killer Frost is kind of ironic for me. She's always one of my faves, so I gotta go with my girl Caitlin. And as for my rating, I would also probably give it 3 stars. I think there were really good high points, but there were some really low points. And not knowing all the Easter eggs to give it that extra oomph. Yeah, solid 3.
Okay, welcome back, Kristen. And of course, my name is Kylie. I participate on this panel as well as moderate, which also happens a lot. I came to the Dctu series, the Arrowverse series, the podcast I created, so that's why I'm here. The Arrowverse shows, I didn't actually resisted watching it for a little bit because I had watched Smallville, all 10 seasons, very devoutly. Love that show. It's one of my all-time favorites. And was very confused why they were jumping straight into another Green Arrow show when we had just spent 6 years or so with the Green Arrow that was really, really good on Smallville. And it's funny because a lot of people, some of the people like in the Hillary and Kyle room over there were telling me, why aren't you watching this show? And then I heard that The Flash was going to be piloted, backdoor piloted off of Arrow. And I had watched the 1990 Flash or 1989, whatever year that was, enjoyed it. He's one of my favorite characters out of the Justice League. And I knew that if I wanted to enjoy what I foresaw them making, which was a universe on the TV, and I have done other universes like the Buffy and so forth, that I'd have to watch the whole thing. So I went back and I started with Arrow, and just like everybody else kept going. And now I feel bad about my initial resistance because I'm totally hearts in love with Stephen and Mel. If you've been listening to our series, I mention it at least once per episode. That was the first time. This time, it'll probably be 6 or 7 more based on the progress of Crisis, which we will talk about in a second. If I were to pick a person or set of people, I kind of have 2 in mind, and I'm basing it on the definitions of the paragons in Crisis on Infinite Earths. I would be 3/4 Kara Danvers / Supergirl, the Paragon of Hope, and 1/4 Kate Kane / Batwoman, the Paragon of Courage. I think I like their buddy. I like the fact that they've buddied up, and that's really fun. That enriches both of their characters a little bit. I like how they're trying to parallel them to their male hero counterparts without going completely full steam ahead on that. Little Easter eggs, little hints, not being totally a copycat, which is nice. If I were to rate Crisis on this rating scale, I'm going to be the outlier again. I liked it. It's not my favorite of the crossovers. I think Elseworlds and Crisis on Earth X were better. I also think this suffered from a year's worth of overbloated hype. I would give it 4 stars based on the fact that they had an ambition and they tried, and it was kind of a pillar of a feat that I didn't know that they were really going to ever be truly successful with, based upon how they set up each of the shows and how they set up going into the Crisis, when so many people who are DC fans, and I am not an avid comic book reader like my siblings, but I'm not a noob like some of the other people. I'm right in the middle. If you're a DC fan, you know this story, at least some of this story. It figures into a lot of the live action and animated and parallel stories, comics wise. It's kind of one of those things that have jumped into pop culture and sat there. I just don't know how they could have truly lived up to all of those expectations when they started ramping up the advertising for it a year in advance, and given what we know of the Crisis comic book story. And that's where I'm going to leave it, because now we're going to talk about it. Now, before we talk about it, you might have seen the posts on social media. We have a contest going. There's a secret phrase. You have to have read the social media post to find out the secret phrase. You're going to have to keep listening to find out the secret phrase. But I can tell you that the prize is a $25 gift card to Sanchez Bistro in Grand Rapids. So if you're a Grand Rapids fan and you love Sanchez, which is highly delectable food, tapas, it's one of the best restaurants in the city. Everybody will tell you that. And if you're here when we're not socially distant and less quarantined, I highly, highly recommend it. But you have to listen for the secret phrase, and you have to PM the Couch Potatoes Unite page. If you comment, you will not be given priority. The PMs will be given priority. So send us a message, and you have to tell us where in the time of the recording, whether it's timestamp or actual time on the clock, we mention the phrase. So good luck. May the odds be ever in your favor. Okay, Crisis on Infinite Earths. So the order of the episodes this time was Supergirl, Batwoman, The Flash, Arrow, Legends. That's how it played out. There was an overarching competing storyline in the sense that Oliver Queen knew that he probably had to die to save the universe from the Anti-Monitor, whereas Barry Allen thought that he was going to die or at least vanish from this very same thing. So if you had been watching the shows up until Crisis, that's basically what you were left to wonder, if you were really wondering at that point, although it was pretty telegraphed. And we'll talk about why. Was it going to be?
Yeah, I don't think it was a probably. I think he knew.
Oh.
He knew.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But if you were a viewer that were just walking into it, that's really the competing tension. Was it Green Arrow that was going to go, or was it the Flash that was going to go? The original comic book story has the Flash and Supergirl dying in Crisis on Infinite Earths. That is not what happened here. So what I want to do is start with the plot and talk about that, but we can also build in Crisis on Infinite Earths was mega packed with Easter eggs, not as many sort of hinty, jokey Easter eggs, more of really nerdy, extra special Easter eggs if you're familiar with the DC Comics, but also if you're the live action devotee, they had a whole bunch of people who have ever been DC people, so you can talk about them too. Go ahead, I'll stop talking, you guys talk about it. Since you're
the Easter eggs list is long.
Very long.
I mean, one of my favorite Easter eggs. Are we going just in the Supergirl episode, or are we just going broad spectrum?
Let's go. Well, if we're going to do broad spectrum, keep it general, because I want to walk through the order of the Crisis a little bit too. So,
because one of my favorite Easter eggs in this was when Lucifer showed up, played by the from the Netflix, well, not just the Netflix series, the Fox series that turned into a Netflix series. That was a huge surprise for me. I did not expect that. And then they had...
and he was on Earth 666, by the way.
Yeah. And he was basically running an underground club just like he does on the TV show. And then also Ezra Miller showing up as the Flash from the movies was another big surprise. That they really did manage to pull off some surprising Easter eggs, as well as, there were a fair amount of spoilers out there in advance that were a little unfortunate. I would have liked it better if we didn't know any of it going in. That's just a preference for me and how I like Easter eggs to be surprises. But God, there were so many.
Yeah, they released a lot early.
Yeah, the Burt Ward one, the original Robin.
Yeah.
I like the Burt Ward one.
I think Lucifer was in episode 3. And he had some banter with Constantine, which was
a great pairing.
Which was really fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we talked about that on some podcasts pre-Crisis on Infinite Earth, that, as Kylie mentioned in the intro, there was lots of build up to this crossover, more than any of the other crossovers, and she mentioned the reasons why. But in the due process of that, and they worked really hard to advertise it with a lot of those Easter eggs and cameos. Not all of them, but a good chunk of them. And I know that as somebody who does get into a lot of the lore and the fandom aspect of it, it took away from it a little bit. I still enjoyed them, but we knew a lot of them were coming. So that did affect it a little bit, but I still liked a lot of them, for sure.
As a big fan of the Michael Keaton Batman movies, I've really appreciated Robert Wall. That's the first thing we see, right?
Yeah, it's right out the gate.
Easter egg, yeah.
Yeah.
On Batman 89.
I enjoyed that. And I enjoyed Burt Ward. I was wondering if he'd be walking a dog, or if he requested it, because a lot of his work now is he created a dog food brand that's supposed to be heart healthy called Gentle Giants, extending dogs' lifespans. So that made me chuckle, because I could see him saying, "No, I want to be walking a dog. That's my career
you're
now."
Welcome for the free plug for your dog food.
Holy deep knowledge about Burt Ward, Batman.
I love that. It was a holy crimson skies. His quote was very much in tune
Holy
with
crimson
character.
skies of death, Batman.
It was so good.
Yeah, it was like Robert Will, Burt Ward, and then Will Wheaton back to back to back in that first episode.
And I did not know Will Wheaton was going to be on it, so that was fun.
I didn't either.
He always finds a way to pop up somewhere.
He does, but I guess I just never would have expected him to be on this. Now, of course, he has done some voice work for DC cartoons. One of his credits is being Aqualad in one of them, so that's like deep DC fandom. But it was awesome, because if you're a nerd, you love Will Wheaton, and there's a bunch of Trekkies on this panel too, so we're like, yeah, Wesley Crusher.
Yeah, Will Wheaton was like the one cameo I picked up right off the bat.
There is hope.
There's hope. Getting there.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the plot, then we can build in some more of the Easter eggs too. So it starts off in Supergirl. Basically, the Monitor brings all of the heroes to Earth 38, where Supergirl and Superman are situated in the multiverse, and it begins with the whole antimatter wave cresting along space. It's already destroyed Earth 2. We know that from Arrow. It's imminently threatening Argo City, that remnant of Krypton where Kara's mother and Clark and Lois have gone to have their son, whose name is Jonathan Kent. That is Comic Direct. So what do you think about the beginning, the first chapter of Crisis in the Supergirl episode?
I really enjoyed the beginning half of the entire crossover. I thought the Supergirl episode was really good. Batwoman is actually far better than it represented itself in its very first episode. Has grown very well as a show unto itself, and it fits really well into the universe and belonged in this crossover more than I expected. I thought it started out very strong, but then it seemed to get to the point where they had to push towards their inevitable ending, and it kind of broke down at that point for me.
So even though I asked about the first episode, where did it break down for you?
It didn't break down until probably it hit the Flash and the Arrow episodes. Probably more towards the Arrow episode is where Crisis broke down for me. I thought the first 2.5 to 3 episodes were really, really strong, and then it started to kind of slide.
Okay.
But the Supergirl episode was great.
The Supergirl story starts off with Tyler Hoechlin, right? We see them and Lois, and he doesn't have his power because they're by a red sun. They've got a kid.
That was the highlight of the episode for me, is him essentially becoming Jor-El.
Yeah.
And having to say goodbye to his son. That was one of the highlights of this whole crossover, because I do like him as Superman, although I absolutely love Brendan Routh as Superman. It was amazing seeing him again. But that was definitely the highlight for me, because I always get emotional during the Jor-El scenes on almost any medium. And so it was a great reversal seeing Clark have to go through that and then be saved last minute himself.
So what he's talking about is they have to place Jonathan, their child, in a pod, just like Clark had to be put in a pod and Kara had to be put in a pod. So that was definitely an homage to every Superman, Supergirl origin story that ever existed. Okay, good job.
Yeah, I think another one of the things, that episode, it just drew a lot, obviously, from, Supergirl's universe, but Superman's universe. I do think, like you mentioned earlier, that Supergirl and Batwoman kind of take from there, obviously, like Superman and Batman. I think, though, like maybe it is in the Supergirl episode or it comes later. Sometimes I think, though, that I think we've talked about this is a common issue with Supergirl, and I know they write it purposefully because it's all they can do. But like, there's a point later when they're kind of starting to hint that she's the paragon of hope. And Tyler Superman is talking to her, and he's like, how is it always that you're so hopeful? And I don't know, one of the things that me and Kyle mentioned is that, like, we get why they have to like reverse those roles sometimes, but
in the comics it would be him
who was always more hopeful, and her that's kind of drawing from that, even though she is the lead character. It's okay to reverse those roles, but they just hinted at it quite a bit. So I think Kyle and I were hoping for a little bit more evenness there, but we still enjoyed, as usual, those two have really good chemistry with each other, so we enjoy that every time those two have their solos or their duet scenes with each other. I don't know how you guys felt, but I enjoyed that.
I mean, I enjoy them together quite a bit as well. I do think there are moments when they are trying to ham-fist Supergirl more toward the forefront.
Which is what Hillary was trying to subtly get her to say in a way.
Right. But I do think, I mean, you're absolutely right. They're faced with the problem that they decided to develop partially because Superman was still in the DCEU, so they were still on the cinematic side. They were trying to develop Supergirl, and again, we've talked about this many times in our DCTU episodes. Supergirl has no consistent comic canon, so there really isn't a lot that they can build off of except for what they have in the show. It didn't bother me in this context just because at this point I was able to suspend disbelief because Clark had been gone for a little while. I think if he had still been on Earth and still being Superman and all this, Earth 38 that is, and still being Superman and all this stuff was happening and that conversation happened the way it did, it would have left me with a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
Okay, so they're unable to, they're not successful in saving Argo City. And what this all builds up into is that Oliver kind of sees the writing on the wall. And we start with a handoff to Mia Smoke. So in the Arrow season proper, the future Star City generation was teleported back into the past via the Monitor for various reasons, which we'll discuss in our Arrow episode coming out very soon. And Oliver basically passes the mantle of Green Arrow to Mia, which has a twofold purpose. One, because they're contemplating a spinoff with her as the Green Arrow. Two, because he knows that he's going to die, or he believes he's going to die, and wants to have somebody, he believes there should be a Green Arrow, essentially. Lois, along with Brainy and Sarah, have to go find Jonathan because he lands on the... So what happens is he lands on an Earth, which is Star City 2046, which is a harken back to that Legends of Tomorrow, where they landed in the future Star City and there was an old Oliver Queen. So that is actually the Earth where Legends landed, so they say, looking back. And we also find out that Nash Wells, who is this season's Flash Harrison Wells on The Flash, he's the one who let the Anti-Monitor out and has been deemed a pariah. So he is... The universe punishes him, the Monitor punishes him, or somebody punishes him by forcing him to watch the tragedies unfold and comment on them, which kind of reminds me of something. So, and eventually there ends up being kind of a last stand, which we're building up towards in the next couple of episodes. So how do we feel about the rest of that?
I enjoy all the Welleses.
Except this, for me, is the worst of the Welleses we've seen.
I agree.
Yeah.
He's kind of bland in comparison to the others, which is a shame because up to this point, I've found every one of them really engaging or mysterious and engaging. And this one didn't ever quite grab me in the way the other ones did. There's, you know, the mystery isn't there. The charisma that he usually has isn't there with this Wells.
Well, and it's like, he didn't set up Pariah at all. He just shows up, and then he just, like, in one sentence, literally lists, like, I am Pariah, and this is why. And then he's blank.
Yeah, there's lots of, like, comic reference, but with little to no setup, which I feel like in the previous crossovers they did a better job of doing. I know it's a big story, but it's not like they didn't have time to do it. And this is one of the things we've talked about in our individual episodes, is that they have so much material to draw from. Obviously, some of it they're permitted to, and some of it they're not permitted to. But if they were permitted to, it would lend itself to a better, even with the condensed episode, it would still probably lend itself to a better overall product in the end. And because it is such a big story, I think that, because, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but Spectre is another example of this. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure Kyle has some pieces to say about that, because he gets passionate. He gets passionate about stuff like that. But it's like, it's one of those things where, you know, in the comic books, Crisis did come. This doesn't always happen this way. Obviously, we all know DC and Marvel over time have drawn from each other. Crisis, comic book wise, came first. And it is a big story. But I feel like on screen there are some places and certain aspects where they drew from what Marvel had already done with the Infinity War movies. I have examples of that. But it kind of still lends itself to some of the issues, I think, because they're trying so hard to draw from things that already worked elsewhere instead of just using the material that they do have at hand. But it's even just the little things, like the advertising they kind of did similarly. Like I actually have like a collage picture of it, if you can see it, where like even the posters themselves, they did very similarly to the Avengers movies. And like they don't have to do that. So it's just one of those things that it's not like a bad thing. It's just if they used more of those references that are actually there, they could.
That's probably one of those Warner Brothers corporate things that encroaches on the storytelling way too often.
Exactly.
Maybe. Exactly. I want to bounce back to Nash, because I agree that he is my least favorite Harrison Wells of all of the ones we've seen. And not only is Pariah not properly seated by the time he appears, but I still don't know, and this goes back to, they used a good portion of the first part of the Flash season to set his character into motion to release the Anti-Monitor, which propels this whole crossover, and I don't even know why he did that. I'm not clear. I mean, he just seemed like an Indiana Jones knockoff most of the time, which actually refers to. So
it's not fleshed out enough for it being such a big part of the episode.
No, I mean, Pariah and Harbinger, like you got a little bit of Layla working with the Monitor, but like you never got any idea of like the significance of why, or the immense the purpose of it all. It's just, and I know that it's so many moving parts, but if they'd focused more on those aspects than just throwing a million cameos into it, they should have smoothed out the actual story first. My biggest complaint being Oliver's big death at the end of the episode, which was not, it was probably the most disappointing thing in the episode.
I mean, yes, just like, again, in the MCU, they needed to, he was already going to leave the universe. We all knew it was coming to the end for Arrow, but a lot of with him becoming Spectre at the end, spoiler, becoming Spectre, it kind of, to me, felt similarly to Tony's send-off.
Spoiler for Avengers Endgame. If you haven't seen it, go.
It just, to me, it just felt a lot like they, and even through the Crisis episodes, like you were mentioning, there are callbacks to other seasons and past shows, which is fair to do, but that again was a very big selling point in Endgame. They used references of the 11 years of MCU. I'm not saying it's bad to do that. It was kind of necessary to some degree, so you get some of that background. But I just feel like for Crisis, there's already so much material in Crisis by itself. You didn't necessarily need to do that. Everything's been fleshed out in the shows. They're long seasons. So there was room to flesh out some of this stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah. And actually, that's a really good segue. Nick and Kristen, I don't know if you have any. So if you want to jump in, feel free to jump in. But the segue is when the anti-monitor is released, instead of the tuning forks portion of the story, there is a quantum tower that is made, which is supposed to stave off the anti-matter wave coming to destroy all the Earths. And it's on Earth 38. The monitor raises it on Earth 38. And they kind of make a stand on that quantum tower, and the anti-monitor releases these shadow demons. That's what they're calling them on the show. They have different names elsewhere. And basically recruit Lena Luthor to develop her big gate, which allows people to evacuate this.
But she was able to develop that really fast, by the way.
Yeah.
She's a Luther.
In like 2 hours.
Yeah, not even real time. What is that? The gate behind you, Spencer?
What are you
Something
doing,
a little different.
poking Brett?
I caught you all off guard with it, didn't I?
You did. How fun. But anyway, Lena Luthor, Katie McGrath's character, Lena Luthor, she develops this gate. They evacuate 1/3 of this planet, or 1/6 of this planet, not even, everybody. And Ollie decides to hold the line, as it were, and not go with them.
The guy with the bow and arrow.
Right.
And
he's really good with that bow and arrow.
For me, that was the hardest part to believe, when he fights 5 of the shadow demons, and they're like, his sacrifice saved an extra however many millions of people. I was like, I don't think those 5 demons he was fighting would have killed all those people. That was a bit of a leap.
I mean, yes, they're doing it on the CW and with the budget they have. All we're asking is if some things can make a little more sense.
So what? Okay, they've expressed their opinion. How does everybody else feel about the initial spoiler death of Oliver Queen / the Green Arrow?
I felt the same. It didn't seem like he was sacrificing himself for that much in that moment for what they were putting on it.
Exactly.
That's
Just
a good way of framing it.
Yeah, just about any other hero would have. I mean, the Flash probably would have saved everyone then if Arrow doing what he did saved millions and millions. So that did take a little wind out of the sail.
I think part of that also boils down to the fact that we all knew going in that Oliver was going to expire at some point. So I don't think it could ever have come across as a grand exit as it could have done if we didn't know going in. It was so telegraphed through the first half of the last season of Arrow, and we'd all seen on social media Steven saying it was over. So it could never live up to the fact that it was happening even.
Yeah, I actually think the writers were trying to be tricky, because I think they knew that we all knew that the Green Arrow was the one, because they're not going to cancel The Flash. That's their highest rated show. Maybe other than Supernatural. I don't know. I haven't looked at the CW's ratings lately, but The Flash is one of the most popular shows on the network. There was no way they're going to kill off The Flash. Not Grant Gustin's Flash. We knew it was going to be the Green Arrow. I think they were trying to be tricky in a way, subvert the expectation in a way by killing him off earlier to surprise us and sock us in the gut, but it ended up landing with a thud.
Yeah.
I mean, they still should have had at least the anti-monitor show up and him hold off the anti-monitor.
That would have been epic.
A little bit more weight, but instead he just has him fighting the Dementor clones. And
yeah, well, it's true. I mean, it took away, again, if that's your thought, and they were trying to misdirect us, which it did not work, but it took away from. I mean, I think you're supposed to have an initial emotional impact, and I think, like you said, for me, it fell a little flat just because I knew what they were doing. Maybe.
Although they did play the music that they created for Tommy Merlin's death to underscore that.
Which
was beautiful. Cool. It was beautiful. Like, I still like a lot of those touches, I'll say, that they added to it. I just think, I just didn't have the same emotional connection to it, because I felt I knew where it was going to go.
Flash is CW's #1 rated show. Surprisingly, Batwoman is their #2 rated show this season. Supernatural is 3rd, Arrow is 4th, and Riverdale is 5th.
Are you caught up on, who's caught up on Batwoman?
I am.
Yep.
Not post-crisis.
It's improved immensely.
It has.
I watched the first episode and I'm like, I can't watch this garbage. But it improved rapidly. Actually, Ruby Rose was never the problem. It's her sister. In the first episode, I'm like, if this is your main villain, you're screwed. Because as anybody that's listened to any of these superhero podcasts I'm on, I always say these are only as good and as interesting as the villains. If the villains suck, the heroes suck.
We don't want to get too far down Batwoman lane.
Oh no, I'm
that season.
I mean, it's telling to me either way, because you and Kristen generally think very differently about things, and you both were like, "Yes, we like it."
Yeah, it's pretty good. And I agree. Ruby Rose is not the problem. She elevates that character. We've been talking about Batwoman being like the least interesting of the Bat family in many respects, but they've done her performance and their meticulousness, because I think they're aware that that's the perception of this character, has really elevated it. It's more interesting now. And I think there are other things that are more interesting. We'll get into the Batwoman season when we do our review this coming summer, when we go through all of the seasons of the DCTU. But for right now, let's stick to Crisis. So everybody.
Yeah, sorry to derail there.
That's okay. Everybody sort of agrees that the Green Arrow death #1 wasn't so hot.
It was bland.
Yeah. The only thing that was surprising to me was that they did it in episode 1. And I was more like angered about it being so like emotional. It was like, okay, well, that's a waste. He kind of really Shadow Demon. That's it. And it's this early. All right. Great. Yeah.
Okay. So I want a quick run through the Easter eggs that we haven't mentioned. We've already mentioned Robert Wall's appearance, Alexander Knox from Batman 89. There were the Titans, Curran Walton.
That was cool.
Who plays Jason Todd's Robin, and Alan Richardson, who plays Hank Hall's Hawk on DC Universe's Titans. And they're on Earth 9, apparently. Saw the Ray come back from Crisis on Earth X, played by Russell Tovey. You already mentioned Burt Ward from Batman 66 and Will Wheaton. We mentioned Jonathan. We mentioned the Pod. We saw Green Arrow and the Canaries, the initial bit about that. We'll talk about that a little later. The musical theme I've mentioned. The MC of Sarah Lance and Ray Palmer's trivia game is played by Griffin Newman, who currently plays Arthur Everest, a.k.a. The Tick, on the Amazon series.
Which got canceled.
It did? Oh.
Did that get 2 or 3 seasons?
I'm not sure.
I think it was 2.
I think it was 2.
I mean, I just like that they were doing the trivia, and Ray was like, oops, sorry, we lost because I changed history.
Little Robot Man, was it? Janis Joplin is singing Little Robot Man.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
That's a shame.
That's those fun little tidbits that Legends always seems to squeeze in there.
Yeah.
The Legends appearances, which we'll get to when we get to the Legends chapter, they never disappoint.
No, they don't.
So now we move to the Batwoman chapter of Crisis, and it starts off where they're trying to get basically a ship, and they get Earth 74's Mick Rory and his Wave Rider. There, the Legends have retired, and he's taken the ship unto himself, and Gideon is no longer there. The voice of the ship is Leonard Snart, a.k.a. Captain.
Yes!
The actual voice of Wentworth Miller.
I was more excited about that than some of those other cameos. I was like, yay, he's back!
And the only moment of disbelief is when you learn that Mick actually programmed the ship at all. It's like, don't know about that.
It's Earth 74, Mick.
Unexpected surprises. He can run.
Yes, that's true.
He can't fix a ship.
He still kind of has banter with him, though. He calls him a snowflake.
Yep, which is cute.
Hashtag snowflake. So in this chapter, this is when we learn about the paragons, the 7 paragons that are supposed to help solve the crisis. We learn 3 of them right off the bat. Sarah is the paragon of destiny. Kara is the paragon of hope. And actually, only learned 2 at first, because then they're looking for the bat of the future, quote unquote, and a Superman who's suffered more than any mortal man, quote unquote. And that leads them to, first of all, Earth 96, where we find Superman, played again by Brandon Routh.
Which was great.
Love it. High point.
Yeah, best part of the crossover.
And then
One of them.
Kate and Kara go to Earth 99, where they find Bruce Wayne, played by Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman through most of the animated vehicles of the last 30 years.
Love Kevin.
That was actually
awesome.
a really interesting, 15, 20 minutes of seeing the broken Bruce Wayne, the completely disheartened and basically hateful version of Bruce. It was kind of cool.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. Sorry, Annie, you can go.
It was funny because they're kind of making fun of the Ben Affleck Batman, who has no problems killing people, and they pretty much okay, this is what he would turn into in a few more years, of this bitter hatred of criminals.
At the same token, it made me kind of sad to see Kevin Conroy in that, because even though he has that grisly look and voice that we all know and love, I was like, man, he's my animated, it's like I'm so nostalgic for the animated series. It was sad to see him be the hateful, mad, evil Batman. A little bit.
Which, everybody wanted him to be the older Batman Beyond's version of Bruce Wayne, which I would have liked more, I think.
There was a little homage to that.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, a little bit. Because
they were trying to combine things.
Yeah, they were trying to combine him along with Kingdom Come Batman.
Right. And that's exactly what they did. He definitely had the same feel as the Bruce Wayne in Batman Beyond, but with the Kingdom Come storyline.
I just really appreciate giving that actor the chance to play Batman on screen, since he's a lot of people's Batman. Like people will say, Kevin Conroy.
He loves being it too. We've seen him a couple times. We mentioned the cons earlier. We've seen him a couple times. He's still, he loves it.
And I appreciate that it wasn't a cameo. It
was like a full part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he got to play Batman in live action, sort of.
That all being said, the reveal of the Bat of the Future was there was a moment where I was confused. Wait, why are they looking? We know it's Kate.
Yeah.
I didn't suspend my disbelief there, and the writers didn't. They tried to make it seem like this was going to be a surprise, but whatever.
I'm kind of with you, Nick. I knew they were just trying to find an excuse to bring Kevin on. That being said, I'm with Hillary on that. Part of my little teenager heart was fluttering with nerd enjoyment at the fact that he finally got to be on screen full face, but the fact that he was the bitter hatred Batman who killed Superman on his Earth and killed the Joker, the Riddler, and Mr. Freeze based on the artifacts we saw made me feel a little icky in my tummy. But did appreciate that
icky in your tummy.
Yes. I did appreciate that Kate had such a rich dialogue with Bruce. I think she was able to explore some of the doubts she was having from her first half of her season on Batwoman. It's an interesting thing because, and we'll talk about this again on Batwoman, but one of the positive sides of that show is that Bruce is not a distant, far-off character that they've erased. She writes to him every single episode and shares her thoughts on the journey of taking up the mantle, the cowl, if you will, of the Bat. And that continued into this episode. And if you've watched the Batwoman season up through Crisis, this scene is very, very rich, even if it happens to be an old, bitter Bruce Wayne that she's talking to.
They used it very well for Kate Kane's / Batwoman's character development, which I appreciated. It actually did help elevate that show by being incorporated into Crisis.
I agree. That's the character I think benefited the most for the crossover, and I think a lot of times our issues with some of the crossovers is like they know they have to do it. It's kind of in the middle, and it doesn't really fit what's going on with the rest of the seasons of the other shows. I think Batwoman kind of fits in the best, at least character arc wise.
And even though it was ham-fisted, I appreciate that she was the paragon of courage. I think that actually fits fairly well too with what they're doing.
It fits the Bat family in general. Yeah. I was going to say, springboarding off of kind of what Kylie said a little bit, one of the things, because you were talking, well, and Spencer kind of said it too, the dialogue between them. I think that's one of the things that the series did well, is that one-on-one dialogue between characters. Like in the, which episode was it? I think the first episode, even that, and I kind of missed saying that earlier, but even the conversations between like Oliver and Sarah, where they're kind of talking about their hardships and their histories, and just some of that. I already mentioned the Clark and the Kara, and they did that throughout the episodes, and I actually liked some of that developing, like with Cassandra and Bruce, a lot of that just development conversation with the one-on-one more than some of that big overarching stuff.
Okay. And then, of course, Kyle said Brandon Routh's favorite moment of the crossover was the Kingdom Come Superman. So let's talk about Earth 96. Because the other big appearance in the Crisis, as well as in some future episodes of the DCTU, John Cryer returns as Lex Luthor for this chapter, and he's grabbed the Book of Destiny and his mission with the Book of Destiny because of his obsession to destroy Superman is to go to all the Earths and destroy all the Supermans everywhere and all infinite Earths, and he catches up to Earth 96 as Superman. So let's talk about that.
I do love that they officially pretty much made him the Christopher Reeves version of Superman also, and brought it all together.
He's so good. He's so good as that version.
And yeah, just seeing him in the suit again, and him in, like, just even when they first meet him as Clark Kent.
He's the best Clark Kent other than Christopher Reeves.
Oh,
he feels like Christopher Reeves Clark Kent.
He does. Like, I was so giddy about that.
The funny thing too is, like, I loved Tyler Hoechlin as Superman, but then when you literally put him in the same room as Brendan Routh Superman, it's no contest.
For him.
Yeah, you're right.
And I agree. Right. Superman Returns is much maligned, and I get a little bit why that is, but I still like that movie because of him, mainly. I mean, he's just so good in it.
Well, that was the interesting thing too, because like that movie suffered from a very weak Lex Luthor and Lex Luthor plot. When you put him like next to John Cryer Lex Luthor, who's actually
John Cryer is a fantastic Lex Luthor. So unexpected. I saw the casting. I'm like, I don't know, and wow, he's good.
And just watching him play off like 3 different Supermen, amazing.
Yeah.
Well, it's like,
Nick, like, why are you laughing?
I think as a podcast, we have to decide on what we're using as the plural of Superman, because Kylie said Supermans, Kyle said Supermen.
In the series, they literally say Superman. I think.
Yeah, I would go with Superman too.
I was just being
grammatically
cheeky.
Oh, okay.
Kylie was cheeky.
I wasn't trying for a grammar.
The Kingdom Come Brandon Routh is one of the things they advertised with, but because he's so good, it wasn't spoiled for me because I was just like, dang, I love him. He's so good for the character.
And I'm just glad he wasn't like a quick flash cameo like some of the other ones. I'm glad they actually...
Yeah, he was through a good portion of the episode.
Because the version of... There's an important Superman Prime in the Crisis storyline, and they made him Superman Prime. And I'm glad they kept that character and had his importance to everything going on. And Brandon Routh was perfect for that.
And it was really a dual homage, not only to his Superman, but to Superman the movie and the Superman quadrilogy, if you will. Because there was one of the Easter eggs I want to mention from here is that at some point he and Tyler Hoechlin's Superman fight. They fight in the air and then they land back in the Daily Planet.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
And he's got him in a chokehold, and he says something to the effect of, what does he say? I I wrote it down and now I can't find it. Oh, he says that he basically refers to the fact that I've already fought myself before or something like that, which referenced Superman 3, which is ironic because Superman Returns ignored Superman 3 and 4 because they're not very popular and they wanted to go a different direction. So
yeah, there were lots of funny. One of the things that I do think the writers have always done well is like the funny inside meta jokes that they add in. Those capture me more than, again, some of that overarching stuff.
And we still have to mention Tom Welling.
Yeah, Tom Welling was important.
Oh yeah, well we
Tom
haven't
Welling
gone
was-
through the Easter eggs, but that's one of the big ones. Tom Welling, finally he agrees to come back to one of these shows because that's the tradition. If you played a Superman before, you have to come on a later Superman vehicle. They've all done it ever since. So he finally
He resisted for a long time after Smallville really doing anything at all until
Really did.
Lucifer recently, where he played Kane.
He's very shy in real life.
I was gonna say he opened up. He started doing cons again, and like all the fans were like, why are you? Just do it."
Yeah, and the scene with him where Lex turns up was just such a high point through this entire thing, especially for me. Like I said at the beginning, it was my favorite part of the crossover. Just the banter and the fact that Lex waits until he's not looking, tries to sucker punch him, he just catches his fist in midair and then knocks him out. It was
but he
such
says, "Hey, I'm still stronger."
yeah.
Like the
It was just beautiful.
Stronger, and
The-
that Tom Welling.
The
Yeah.
funny casual way he just throws aside the kryptonite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing I think could have made that better would be maybe somewhere in there we had got a Michael Rosenbaum appearance.
I know that was
Yeah, Michael
awesome.
didn't jump on board.
Nope. I think they did. I'm sure they asked him. It would have been kind of fun if.
I thought they didn't ask him. I thought he came out on Twitter and said they haven't asked me.
That's possible.
I
I'd
don't
be
know that
surprised.
I don't know that he phrased it like that. I think what he said was, contrary to the rumor, I'm not going to be on Crisis on Infinite Earths. I don't think it talked about whether or not he was asked.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's very possible. I mean, I don't know if he was asked or not, and I don't think anybody would be talking about it this late in the game, but I would be surprised if they didn't ask him, and I don't think he was necessarily game at the time, but he could have been busy. We don't know.
And I do have very mixed feelings about him giving away his powers.
Yeah, some people were really worked up about that.
Because
That's a reference to Superman 2.
I mean, it gives him the happy ending everybody wanted for him and Lois. But at the same time, the entire plot of Smallville, and it's condensed in the finale, is him realizing that his powers are who he is. He can be both Smallville and Superman, and he's not losing anything. He can have the life and be the hero. There's a whole big scene in the finale of Smallville with Jor-El where he's
Spoiler for those who haven't seen it.
flashing through his
Sorry,
entire
Krista.
life in Smallville, and he realizes why he can't just have a normal life. So it kind of felt like a little disappointing that he just gave it up. But at the same time, it was heartwarming because, we were never going to get Tom Welling in the suit. He never wanted to wear the suit. He was never going to wear the suit. But I still would have liked to know that he was still out there doing good.
He is in his way as Clark Kent.
Yeah, I mean, it is just a beautiful look at if Clark had decided to choose being Clark as opposed to, basically giving up being a god. Choosing the human side as opposed to the Kryptonian side. I actually really appreciated that moment.
Yeah, it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me because I guess what I didn't do is take it as a literal projection off of the Smallville TV series. I thought it was just in this environment, in this multiverse, what they've created as part of the Arrowverse. This is what they're giving us that's Smallville related.
I mean, I liked Erica Durance with him. Those two have always had amazing chemistry. Amazing chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's two daughters.
Yeah, and it's like she walks onto the scene, and it's seriously like no time has passed between those two. They picked it right up, that same chemistry. It was amazing.
Do you think one of their daughters is named Chloe?
Maybe, but after the actress has kind of had her rocky last couple of years, maybe not.
Maybe
That
not.
was long before she got crazy. Oh, junior podcaster Gracie has decided.
I agree. But yeah, I might get a lot of times they try not to reference her now, unfortunately, because of the scandal that she created.
Hashtag sad.
Oh, Nick doesn't know what it is. We'll fill you in later.
Yeah, we will. This is not good podcast discussion. The parallel plot on this episode that Sarah Lance, Barry Allen, Mia Smoke, and John Constantine decide that they're going to try to save Oliver, and they're going to do this by resurrecting him in a Lazarus pit and then having Constantine restore Paul like he did for Sarah Lance. The problem is we learned on Arrow that Thea and Roy somewhat had destroyed all of the Lazarus pits so that nobody could be in a Lazarus pit. So they had to go to a different Earth to find a working one to get him alive.
Again.
Do you hear yourself?
Just when you think the
I'm
Lazarus
just explaining
is gone.
What?
Go ahead.
I said, just when you think the Lazarus pits are done and you never have to hear about them again, it becomes a plot point again.
Tired plot point.
Tired plot point. Be more creative. You have other ways to go about it. You're in the comic book world. Get over the Lazarus.
Well, even then, even in this crossover, it ends up being a pointless plot because it doesn't go anywhere. Like, they could have just launched into John Constantine contacting Oliver's spirit. They didn't have to do this whole side quest.
It's pretty much just filler so they can call back to the Lazarus Pit episodes. It's just a bit on the nose.
And the random evil Jonah Hex.
Yeah.
Evil Jonah Hex.
I forgot about that.
I did not realize that guy is one of the actors in That Thing You Do until this.
Yes.
I love That Thing
He's
You Do.
Jimmy.
Yeah. That movie's great.
Oh, that guy. I just realized that.
It's like no one's seen him since That Thing You Do, and suddenly he pops up as Jonah Hex.
I know, it's weird.
Mind you, if that happens to your face, what other options do you have?
Well, we call him
What the heck?
No one heard my joke. Okay, cool.
Oh, what
Sorry,
was it?
Kristen, repeat it.
So would we call him a one-hit wonder?
Oh, no.
No, the
It was probably better than no one heard it.
Love you too, buddy.
So I was going to say that at least the Lazarus Pit wasn't successful, but they did end up on Leanne Yu because that's also purgatory. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Also a
Leanne
bit
Yu.
on the nose.
because Leanne Yu means purgatory.
Yes, in fact, Constantine actually says what a convenient, he makes a comment about it.
They don't lose the meta jokes.
What a convenient correlation.
Constantine was refreshing throughout this as
He's
well.
always awesome. Good job,
Love
Matt
him.
Ryan.
Yes, I love him. He's great. And also what's happening is, and I'm just going to mention it, but we don't have to talk about it, Ray Palmer is building a Paragon detector.
Because of course he is.
Like, how does he know how to make that?
He's a super genius.
Also, they
Very
need
super
something for Ray to do.
Yep.
I guess.
So it's kind of filler.
Yeah, because they never really, after the initial appearance of Ray Palmer's character as Adam, I think they were very limited by budget in being able to use the Adam. So anytime they wanted him to be on screen, it was in a very limited role, not as the Adam, but always as Ray Palmer, which was a little unfortunate.
Yeah. I don't have any other. So,
Yeah, it's kind of like Lena quickly building the other thing. Just like,
Yeah.
oh, we're just gonna throw this in here, and it's just gonna magically be awesome and
It's
work.
like, hey guys, I got some spare parts back here. Just give me 20.
Yeah, I'm just gonna throw this thing together. Yeah, I'm a genius, but I still got everything I need. We're good.
a
I
little
will-
Deus Ex Machina.
I am so glad they had a scene with Ray and Superman.
Well, they had
That's
to.
true. That was good. That was actually brilliant.
And I love Supergirl walking in and seeing
Ray.
that Superman, and then
She's
like,
like,
wow.
Ray, you bulked up, Ray. And
then
they're
they're
like,
like-
that's your cousin.
Which harkens back to the Invasion crossover when the Atom notices her for the first time and he says, hey, she looks like my cousin.
Yeah.
Nice.
Meta references.
Lots of references. So speaking of those, some of the things in this chapter, the Luke Fox that you see in the Gotham City actually is supposed to be an homage to a comic book version of Luke Fox. Lois cries. So when they're going to Earth 75 and they try to find Superman, and there's a picture of the tiger Superman kind of dead. The way she's positioned refers visually to the death of Superman.
Which is what really brought me back into comic books, was that comic book. I was here on vacation in '92 when that came out, and it brought me completely back into the comic book world.
Mm-hmm. Bruce Wayne, Kevin Conroy's Bruce Wayne says, "My parents taught me a very different lesson. Life only makes sense if you force it to," which is a quote from Batman versus Superman.
Which is also a quote from the Dark Knight Returns comic
Frank
book.
Miller's comic book, graphic novel.
Yep.
And then we've already mentioned the Smallville. So those were the Easter eggs in that one. So then we move to the Flash episode. And in the Flash episode, the Paragon detector identifies Barry Allen as the Paragon of Love, John Jones, or the Martian Manhunter, as the Paragon of Honor. And then Osric Chow, Kevin Tran, Prophet Kevin Tran from Supernatural, is apparently the Paragon of Humanity. He plays Ryan Choi in Ivytown, and they all have to get together and figure out how to defeat the Anti-Monitor. And what they do is they end up breaking through that door that Nash Wells broke through to release the Anti-Monitor, and that's where they find the source of the antimatter wave. And the person that's augmenting it happens to be Earth 90's Barry Allen Flash, played by John Wesley Shipp, which leads into another twist on the crossover. So let's talk about this.
I just like, as per usual with the Flash episode, it starts off like right away with lots of funny dialogue. It's like Killer Frost says to Elongated, or says about Elongated Man, don't mind him. It's his first crossover, and Cisco Cisco right away wants to rework the Anti-Monitor name, even though that is his actual name in the comic. But Spencer having like background ADD.
Yeah, that's not good.
It's a new one.
Is that Veep? Where?
Is that Veep?
There's
Canada.
a Canadian flag in there.
Yeah.
I don't think so. We're in the Prime Minister's office.
Yep.
I'm trying to find something that's not so glitchy.
Did you have other jokes you were talking about before we got distracted?
I'd have to go back and look, but I think this is where the Lucifer cameo did happen in the third episode.
It did.
Yep.
It did.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, actually, and the interaction between Lucifer and Constantine was really fun.
It was. I enjoyed their banter. I hope to see maybe more of it in the future, but I'm not going to get too excited.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're on set with Tom Ellis's Lucifer coming for its final season on Netflix.
Maybe. They're in discussions.
We may not see Tom Ellis again, which would be unfortunate because I actually really enjoyed him in that role.
But it's a big maybe. At first it was going to be an end. Then they've been talking about the fact that they might renew for season 6 because it's quite a popular stream on Netflix.
Good. That would be great.
But there's negotiations involved, and you can Google that. But let's talk about the big. So I'm trying to lead you toward the big twist about the fact that it's Earth 90's Flash versus Grant Gustin's Flash. Take us home.
I mean, as someone who watched that show and owned it on DVD, I got emotional, especially when he flashes to his girlfriend Tina as he's dying. But
they got married, apparently.
Yeah, if you didn't watch that show, though, I don't know if you'd care.
Yeah, Kristen, did you have that emotional connection to that scene?
No. I mean,
it's no.
No. I mean, I only know him as the Jay Garrick Flash that we've come to know on The Flash. So I didn't know this Earth 90 version of him. But it's still emotional when he's like flashing back to the love of his life. And I mean, I get it, but it wasn't a big deal, I guess.
Well,
Heartless. I never watched it. So.
And where they place this whole antimatter with the treadmill and him dying is kind of weird because in the end it didn't matter. Like they stop it and then the wave comes right back and destroys everything.
And of course Barry wants to save
in the
him.
Comics, pretty much everything is destroyed, and then he's using that cannon to destroy the last 5 Earths that somehow got protected by the Paragons. So it made sense more in the comic books, and then that sacrifice actually saved everybody. In this, it's like the wave starts right back up, and it didn't even matter.
So he like disintegrated for like
no reason.
Especially like bringing Black Lightning in to shoot the machine, and he stops it for a second, and then it starts right back up.
Which is again was just that ham-fisted way to
get Black Lightning on board.
Yes, connect it and say, okay, now Steven's exiting, so he is going to be a part of this.
Yep.
This universe now, which is fine. I mean, he should be, but.
And don't get me wrong. His scene with Grant Gustin is amazing, and it made me want to watch Black Lightning. Mm-hmm. That was like probably one of the most well-acted scenes in this crossover. But where they chose to pull him in and what to do, it just felt so weird and small.
Here's my This is one of my problem moments of the crossover. So for literal years on The Flash, we're talking about the Flash is going to disappear in Crisis on Infinite Earths, and everything we see is Grant Gustin's Barry Allen on this newspaper that keeps changing in the Time Vault. It does not make sense to me when they do stop it for a second and the John Wesley Shipp Barry Allen is coaxing and mentoring him again, and he says to him, who's to say which Barry Allen it actually is? Well, if it was going to be that Barry Allen, you think it would have been mentioned up until this point. Now, I have not watched The Flash post-Crisis, not a single episode. But for me, that moment kind of undercut a huge chunk of the Flash that we had watched, at least in the past few seasons, since they began building this up. Now, if there's something that I don't know, fair enough. But I hated that moment, to be honest.
Well, it's just it's kind of unfortunately, again, that's one of the things that I didn't love about this crossover. It's just another example of things not being as fleshed out as it has been in previous crossovers to give us that final impact and excitement about everything that's happening. I mean,
it also makes me mad. Sorry. It also makes me, I guess I'm going to rant here. Everything that is Flash-centered, the big stories that are Flash-centered, this writing team really has a problem with. Because that, coupled with the Flashpoint debacle, is really having me questioning if they even understand what they've got a hold of.
The Flashpoint debacle was one of the biggest mistakes in the entire DCTU history.
Live action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I mean, this whole, in terms of the history of the Flash in the comic books, this is literally Barry Allen's biggest moment. They kept the character dead for over 20 years. And it was, in the comics, like, that's unheard of. They always bring him back. I mean, as you can already tell in these Arrowverse shows, somebody dies, they bring them back right away. So it's Barry Allen's biggest moment. And I get it. You're not going to kill Grant Gustin Flash when he's the lead of a show, but he should have been more involved.
Right.
It should have been his moment, and then maybe something at the very last minute stops it. But him just standing as a bystander on the sidelines with everybody else took away from the importance of it.
Especially with an extremely emotional penultimate Flash episode that precedes the Crisis, because it was it entirely revolved around the idea that Barry wasn't coming back in this Crisis. And in order to pay that off emotionally, they should have done something so much bigger than they did.
Just like
we very, very first saw the newspaper where it said Barry Allen disappears in Crisis. What year was it on there originally?
Later than 2019.
It was like 2029. They put one. They changed history with their daughter.
Yeah.
The newspaper flashed 10 years earlier, and that's when it changed, probably from him to the 90s Flash disappearing in Crisis.
See, I wonder whether maybe this was not in their original plans, but when Arrow started to fall apart and Steven said he wanted to leave, that it changed what they were going to do. I'm wondering whether Crisis was originally intended to be the end of the Flash series. They would end it with Crisis.
Which would have made more sense.
Yeah.
That actually was the question that I was going to ask too, thinking that, do you think they just kind of retconned the newspaper to bring it into the fold when they decided we're going to do this big Crisis crossover, maybe 2 or 3 years ago by the time they started planning it? Because I'm with Spencer. I think that this wasn't the original plan for the newspaper.
I don't think so either. I think originally they were thinking it was going to be a very big end, for a real end for Barry Allen on the Flash, that then they just realized there's no way they could make it work.
Or here's a better opportunity to use it.
I don't know either.
Gotta with the ratings somehow.
Yeah, I guess I don't know if I could respect the choice either way, because if they decided that this was the better opportunity, they betrayed the comic book idea.
And I almost would have even preferred it being Wally West.
Yeah.
Because then it's so emotional, because then he starts to go home to his wife and his surrogate father and tell them, I'm sorry, I'm still here, but you lost your family. I think that would have worked a lot more better and paid more homage to the legacy of the comics.
Plus, we would have gotten rid of the Wally West in the DCTU, which everyone hates.
Has no interest being in it anyway, so it would have been a much more fitting send-off for that character than wherever they keep sending him.
Tibet, I think.
Yeah.
And on the flip side,
I was going to say, on the flip side, they did make the choice, and then what they did do is just so milquetoast.
See, remember at the beginning of this when we started, I said this is where it all starts to break down. The first 2 episodes were great, and then it does this slope down.
It's just like these. It's just contributing to my solid 3, basically. But out of that scene, I still like, anytime John and Grant have dialogue together, I still love that. I mean, that whole storyline didn't make a whole lot of sense, but every time those two talk with each other, it still brings me back to the first season of The Flash, which is so heartwarming and emotional.
Well, I have to praise, this is where I praise Grant Gustin. I mean, every individual conversation he had was great. All the scenes with one other or 2 other characters were really good.
Yeah, the one-on-one dialogue, yeah.
He manages to have good chemistry. I don't know if it's Grant or because he was playing this character or all of the above, but his scenes tend to be a highlight in all the crossovers.
I agree.
Yeah. So the other big plot point on this chapter is that Harbinger, who is Lila Michaels, Dig's wife, however, she do not understand why Lila has to be the Harbinger, so maybe Kyle has some theories there, but she's brainwashed by the anti-monitor and sent to kill the monitor and is successful. So, and then because this happens, the antimatter wave manages to destroy every Earth in the multiverse, and Pariah transports the 7 Paragons, only not Kingdom Come Superman, because Lex rewrites the Book of Destiny, replaces his name under the Paragon of Truth, and that's who appears. And they're actually at the vanishing point, which, as we know from Legends of Tomorrow, is outside of time and space, the one island in which they cannot be harmed. So
I enjoyed the moment where Lex appeared as Superman kind of crumbled into nothingness. I thought that was a really fun moment, actually, just because of the way that Cryer played it.
Mm-hmm. That was unexpected for me. I did not see that coming. So.
Yeah, it was an OS moment.
Yep.
But
I love that he replaced the Paragon of Truth.
Yeah, it made it even better, didn't it?
There was a lot of meta going on there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you all remember when we read or heard that John Cryer had been cast as Lex Luthor, we were all a little like, John Cryer, really?
Ducky / one of the 2.5 men? What?
Yeah, the kind of weak 2.5 men. But when he first appeared and came out of his castle and was conducting and the laser beams and all of the stuff, it was such a brilliant moment that he's inherited this character, and I can't see anybody else playing him now.
Yeah, he's dope. He's doing a really good job. Good job, John Cryer.
He's excellent.
And there might be a strong chance that John Cryer was holding 2.5 men together behind the scenes, maybe.
Yeah, right.
That's for our 2.5 men podcast. No one's
stepping
requested.
back just a little bit.
Some people like that show.
I said no one's requested it.
Oh.
Stepping back just a touch, back to Lila. Does anybody else find her to be probably one of the most annoying characters in the entire Arrowverse?
Thank you.
She never serves much of any sort of interesting purpose. And not a good one.
Nope.
And the writers have her.
Oh, go ahead, Nick.
The writers have her. They do whatever they want with her, so she's not.
She's a filler.
Yeah, so she doesn't have like a consistent character. Like
no, her character's all over the place.
I mean,
completely morally ambiguous.
Yeah, you're supposed to be emotionally connected to her because she's, she's Diggs' woman, but I still don't feel that. Again, like we were talking earlier with like Ollie's first death, it just kind of falls, like anytime she's there, it just falls. No offense to the actress, but your character, the character itself just falls flat or is annoying because it actually feels like she's more in the way than anything else.
Especially since there's no real good structure to Argus anymore.
She's supposed to be like an expert at doing what she does, but she doesn't come off that way.
Right.
Well, and the number of times that she has done things that have put John in a really bad place. I mean, people in this day and age get divorced for bringing the wrong chips home from the grocery store. She's doing things that put the family in jeopardy, wipe out half of a city, and he's fine with it. It's stupid.
Or just like all the people the Monitor could have chosen to be his right hand. And he picks her.
Maybe he just thought it was a big misdirect because it is her. She would go under the radar.
Don't get me wrong. In the comics, Harbinger is Lila. Like that character, John Diggle, doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So when that character was introduced as Lila, people were like, oh, she's going to eventually become Harbinger. But she's nothing like Harbinger from the comics anyway, so it didn't even matter.
Well, once she was Harbinger, she was just
bland.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not understand her purpose.
Glowy eyes.
That seems to happen a lot in this crossover. Is when something goes wrong, it does become very bland. It's not that it doesn't make sense. It just has no depth or flavor. It's just
that's what we were saying with Pariah. Once Nash becomes Pariah, it could be a cardboard cutout at that point.
Yeah, and that's the same with Lila. She literally walks on scene and she's like, I am Harbinger now. Like, it's very one note.
Okay.
Which is also very similar to now her Spectre moment. This guy shows up and he's...
That's my biggest pet peeve, by the way, in this whole crossover.
Yes, because, frankly, I don't know a lot about Spectre.
Spectre is DC.
I needed some information.
Spectre is huge. He is very powerful. He is Jim Corrigan. Never has he been Green Lantern.
Green
Arrow.
Sorry, I was going into Green Lantern. Did briefly become Spectre, but during the Crisis, it's Jim Corrigan. He's a very important character. And for him to just like walk out of the woods as a regular guy and just be like, hi,
what's up, dudes?
You're Spectre now. It completely did that. I mean, it's just so offensive to that character.
It was confusing. Was that a cameo? Yes. What did I miss?
Yeah, exactly. Because
if
you didn't know the character, it came out of nowhere.
Literally.
It was not fleshed out or set up at all.
Oh, Spectre, and why are you agreeing to this?
You have all these episodes of Flash and Arrow building up to Crisis, and Spectre's the most important part. He literally saves everything. You should have seeded Jim Corrigan. You should have seeded who Spectre is and how powerful he is. Even in the show, Oliver gets his power, he just gets a hood, and you get no clear definition of what his purpose is.
A different hood.
What he's capable of. why it is. It's just such a slap in the face to a character that is actually very interesting and very cool.
Well, just because they wanted to again ham-fist Steven's exit and make him super heroic and all of that jazz, which he has his moments, but I still, there was just so many bits missing from it, and it obviously leads up to Oliver's second death, and it just again you're supposed to have obviously a really deep emotional reaction. I had more reaction from the other characters having their reaction than the actual demise itself. Like, no offense to Steven, I love Steven, he's wonderful,
You're kind of jumping into the arrow part.
Yeah,
sorry, we can backtrack.
Since there's, before we go off the Spectre thing, I will say one episode of the Constantine show that got canceled was all about Jim Corrigan, and it ends with him with a vision of the Spectre and like this powerful cloak surrounding Jim Corrigan and a vision of Jim's death. It did more justice to this character in one 40-minute episode than they've done on anything in the Arrowverse. They should have just not used Spectre at all and made a different character. I get so frustrated with it.
I think, Kristen, you said you didn't care about it, right?
I didn't know why I was supposed to. I had to Google who Spectre was. I paused it and I'm like, okay, what is this? I have no clue. I feel like I should know what this is. That helped once I had the context, but watching it in real time, I don't know who this guy is walking out of the woods. Why is he choosing Oliver? What's the point? Why am I supposed to care?
So it kind of derails.
It does.
I was like, is this someone from season 2 of Arrow that I've just blocked out? What?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of the time throughout the DC universe, it seems that any characters that aren't very well known to people outside of comic books get this kind of treatment.
Well,
it's like, well, it's so important in the comic book we have to mention it, but Joe Schmo doesn't know who that is, so let's just get over it quickly.
But see, that's a bad thing to have too. I mean, you don't want to dumb down to your audience.
I agree with you fully, but it seems to be a trope.
Right, but which confuses the people who don't know and upsets the people who do. Like, it's a lose-lose.
Yeah, and it's like, I know it's Stephen Amell's last hurrah, but to give him the Flash's position in the story and the Spectre's position in the story.
Because they wanted to give him, they saw how Tony's big send-off was really successful. People reacted strongly to it, so they jumped on that boat.
Yeah.
Well, I have to agree. It was very confusing. They did all the stuff that where Oliver is convinced to take on Spectre happens off screen. We don't even get to see that.
Right.
That to me is probably the biggest failing of the crossover.
They could have done one whole episode just on that.
Yeah, they really could have. And I
set it up.
Because we're going to talk about the Arrow episode, which I think is the worst of the 4.
Yes.
5, I'm sorry, but I want to quick mention a few Easter eggs here in this episode.
I have a quick question about the episode.
Sure.
Who is Ryan Choi? Did I miss
He
something?
is the second Adam. In the comics, he is Adam after Ray Palmer.
Okay.
Oh.
I was like, wait, who is this guy? It was
I was like, who's the random Asian kid?
They didn't set him up well either. They didn't. Like,
I just kept saying, it's Kevin, it's Kevin.
Yeah, he says he's a fan of Ray Palmer.
Yeah.
That was the only thing.
Oh my gosh, you influenced me to do this, and then I did that. I mean, they had a whole thing where they just walk in to see him because they realize he's the Paragon, so they show up and they're like, and then he's all he's being a fanboy.
Right. I'm really not knowing that. I'm like, okay, who is this random scientist they're pulling off the street of Ivytown?
Exactly. Otherwise, it just kind of feels like in Deadpool 2, where they just pull that random Peter guy, all these superheroes, and then one random guy. They should have had some sort of context as to, like,
why?
Yeah.
Who is this person? Educate me. I'd rather.
He also coins the term microverse.
Hey.
I mean, they have lots of episodes in the individual series. They could have definitely started to work some of these things in then.
Right. I mean, because didn't Oliver and Felicity move to Ivytown at some point? Or there was
Briefly.
Yeah. So why couldn't they have like, hey, we know this is going to happen. Let's make Ryan their next door neighbor or something. Like, yeah.
That was years ago, though, when they were in Ivytown. I think it was the Damien Dark season.
Do something. Okay, that was my question. So thank you.
Yeah.
I'm more educated now.
So a few Easter eggs here. Earth 203 features Ashley Scott. She played Helena Kyle, a.k.a. the Huntress, on the short-lived Birds of Prey show.
Which was terrible.
It was not
of all their shows and things to shout out. The one that got
nice.
Look,
they didn't shout out Gotham, okay?
I think they partly shout that out because it's a property that they're playing on Seed.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that they're thinking of retooling. So says the reports.
Mm-hmm.
Ralph Dibney references when he first comes aboard the Wave Rider, he references the All-Star Squadron, which is another name for a DC coalition of heroes from the comics that's supposed to be impacted by the crisis.
That was actually one of my disappointments for the whole thing. We didn't get as much Ralph as I would have liked. He's a really fun character. I would like to have seen him more.
Me too.
And then at the point when Kingdom Come Superman is dying and Supergirl cradles him, the Brandon Routh Superman, that is actually a direct parallel reference to Superman cradling Supergirl at the end of the comic Crisis. So those are the Easter eggs in that one, not too many. We then move to Arrow. So Arrow, for me, is the struggle bus of the Crisis on Infinite Earths, because really what it ends up being is nice. Weird,
yeah,
nice.
I think you need more ambient lighting. That's why you're having so many.
Yeah. I have to get up and go across the room and turn on the lights above me.
I'm melting into Oliver's beard.
You are a specter.
It looks like he's looking down at your crotch. I mean, I'm
Nice. Well, he's turning on a light. He's turning on a light. Well, he's
Up.
Basically, the whole Arrow chapter of the Crisis on Infinite Earths is a two-seated plot. One, Barry has run them all through the Speed Force. Supergirl, Lex, and Ryan are gone to Maltus, which is the Monitor's home planet, because they're trying to stop him from ever going back in time to the dawn of time, because he is apparently the one who breaks through to the antimatter universe and releases the anti-Monder. On the other side, he loses all of the other Paragons into the Speed Force, and then Oliver shows up as Spectre and basically has to convince Barry to help him, to get him to find the rest of them in the Speed Force, which is infinitely large. And of course, he asks him a couple of times, "Do you trust me?" And Barry answers a couple of times, "With every cell in my body." What did we think about that plot?
Repetitive and
yes.
not entertaining or engaging.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was just
pretty much covers it.
Putting them in the Speed Force and like waking them all up it just felt like pointless filler. It added nothing.
And he apologized to the people who aren't really there a couple of times. Sorry, you're not even really here. I didn't need it. It went on too long.
It did. This episode of the 5 felt the most like filler. And because I knew we still had a couple of episodes of Arrow left, it felt like the first of 3 eulogizing memorials.
Yeah.
To Oliver/Arrow, which I get. Actually, it'd be the first of 4 because there's one in the next episode too. And to me, it was a little too much. The beads of nostalgia did not hit here because it's not his show that we were watching. It was the crossover that we were watching. And since they ended up bringing the key, this is a spoiler for Arrow, which we'll talk about in our next episode. Since they ended up bringing the key other members of the universe into his series finale, we didn't even need this episode, quite honestly. The only thing that came out of this episode was they managed, well, they do fight the Anti-Monitor at the end. He fights the Anti-Monitor at the end. They fight off the shadow demons at the dawn of time. Because even though they convince the Monitor not to go back in time, it still happens somehow, which they don't explain how that happens either. Go ahead.
I thought it was because there's infinite Earth, so there's infinite monitors, and it's destined to happen.
Okay.
I think they said that.
It's ridiculous because at that point, the multiverse is still destroyed by his wave.
Right. Doesn't make sense.
I didn't say it makes sense, but that was their explanation.
Okay. Well, they all end up back all fighting the shadow demons.
I mean, he's right, though. That was the explanation.
Even as Hillary said, it's a ripoff of Endgame where they killed Thanos and then randomly the Thanos from the past shows up. It's like, okay, we're copying beats. We don't have an explanation for it in our movie like Marvel did. But people won't notice that. We'll just throw more cameos at them.
It was successful for them. We have our own comic book material to reference, but it was super successful for Marvel on screen. And by the way, people love it, so we're just going to we don't even know. Maybe they don't even know they're doing it. Maybe it's subconscious. I don't know.
And by the way, since we're mentioning this, the Anti-Monitor looks nothing like that.
It looked like Apocalypse.
What? What, Nick?
Didn't the Anti-Monitor look like Apocalypse?
A little bit, but mostly he's just big armor with teeth showing, like huge
They gave him
teeth.
The Josh Brolin Thanos
but
chin.
Instead they gave him the Thanos skin and the same chin.
Man, it just took me back to the 90s X-Men cartoon with Apocalypse, the way the design.
I didn't even think about that, but that's what I said. I think there's a lot of things that they don't even realize that they're doing sometimes. I don't know. Maybe they do. Maybe they do, but there comes a point where you gotta stop trying to feed off of other things. You have your own material,
and they've got good material. That's what frustrates me so much.
That's what I'm saying, and we've gone on this conversation in many of the other episodes, and sometimes when we're tongue in cheek about it. But the bottom line is, they have enough of their own material. They don't have to do that. And the story did come first. It came before,
and it's
the Infinity War story did.
And for me, the Monitor in the comics is a lot scarier looking than what they went with. And they could have, even on this budget, he's mostly covered in armor. You could have easily pulled him off and have him be terrifying. And they spent so much time with all the appearances of the Monitor in all these shows, and they never did anything with the Anti-Monitor. So you finally get to him, and like Spencer said, it's only as good as the villains, but we've never spent any time with the Anti-Monitor. He's
right.
done this threat looming in the background, but you know nothing about him. It's just another one of the things they didn't flesh out.
And by the end of the crisis, you don't really know or care that much about the Anti-Monitor anyway.
No.
Yeah. They're just this guy just appeared when the Monitor went back in time. You get nothing. He's just this mirror copy.
If it's seated incorrectly, not only do you have all the emotional tie to obviously your main characters, but also that main villain. You have that emotional tie. You want to see where that's going to go. For people like Krista and Nick especially, they don't know, and so it ends up falling flat, which we've already said a few times. Now, some people, maybe they feel like it was really condensed well and it was served its justice. I just still feel like there are things that they could have done better with it to make it more satisfying in the end.
Well, whatever they may have done, satisfying or not, the punchline of this episode is that Oliver Queen, with the Spectre inside him, defeats, I put in quotes, the Anti-Monitor enough or long enough to rebirth the universe, if you will.
This is the episode where they all Care Bear stare at Oliver, right?
Yes, the Care Bear stare. That is what happened.
I seriously could not stop laughing because it's playing the serious music as all the Paragons are sitting there intently staring at them fighting in the far-off background. And such dramatic music to the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen.
It's almost like after school, especially, they're like, we know what we've got to do, guys. And they all stand kind of like Peter Pan,
seriously, if you mix the old Power Ranger show with the Care Bears, this is the hybrid you get.
I was getting Captain Planet vibes.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, Nick, yes.
Which reminded me of the Legends when they got all their totems together and their powers combined.
Yeah, well, it was supposed to, but I don't think they were doing it purposefully here. I think they thought they were clever here.
Yes.
Now you're bumming me out with the Care Bear stare thing.
We watched that
exactly
scene and it's taken seriously now. There's no way in the world you can do it.
Listen, I love these DC characters too, but sometimes it's not the characters. It's just, like I said, the way it's presented. And yeah, it just wasn't, in terms of their crossovers, the richest. But
now that we're thinking about it this way, Oliver didn't even care about their Care Bear stare, so why did they do it?
Yeah, ultimately it wasn't needed, but they just needed to have that big thing to have the Paragons come together, and so they could once again tell the audience what each of them were.
Mm-hmm.
Basically.
But then Oliver dies. Spoiler. Oliver dies the final time. And I'm not only to laugh, it's very sad.
The Spectre can't die. He's already dead, but...
I thought his second death scene was at least cooler, and he had a really lovely speech. And Barry and Sarah were very sad. I was very sad because they were very sad. And then Steven is very cute, and he was crying. He was.
See, she just has the love goggles on. Steven, listen,
if you're watching, I love you.
Yeah, he's used to people telling him that.
Oh, fine. I'm just one in a billion people, whatever.
But I think I already said that earlier, that I still had more of an emotional reaction to their reactions than him, unfortunately, actually passing away and sacrificing for the betterment of the future. Sadly,
at least it was better than the Shadow Demon's death.
Yeah,
it was a little bit better, but again, it with all that forced buildup and not fleshed out story, it took away from it. And even though I love Stephen Amell, as many people do, I still just didn't think it did it quite justice. But they acted the scene very well, and again, the dialogue between the characters, because I think it's Barry and Sarah that's up there with them, like on the big cliff. That's all very lovely, and it was beautifully shot. I will say it was beautifully shot, and the effects for that were enjoyable to watch. I don't want to be all negative, because there were parts about it that made me happy as a comic book watcher of things. So
we might get more of this in the next episode, but I really do like the Barry and Sarah moments. I think those two characters together I would like to see more of.
Yeah, when Sarah said that Oliver was the last tie that she had to her Earth, that was a little heartbreaking.
That's like the next episode.
Yeah,
that's episode 5, but she does say that before she was on the boat.
Mm-hmm.
So we can transition there. There was only a couple of things Easter egg in the Arrow chapter. The scenes that we saw in the Speed Force, the original death of Sarah was a copycat, but for Barry showing up. And the Hall of Justice glimpse that we saw was a reenactment of parts of the Invasion crossover when Supergirl and Green Arrow first meet. And then Maltus, the Monitor's planet, actually has a rich story history in the comics. There's lots of different people that use it. It's a headquarters for the Legion of Superheroes at one point. Brainiac 2 puts his flag on that planet at one point. So Maltus is just one of their all-purpose planets for things. So now we get into the Legends of Tomorrow. The last chapter airs on the same night. Basically, where we're at with this chapter is the entire denouement of the crisis. We've passed the climax. The universe has been rebooted. There's one additional climactic scene that happens in this. The Anti-Monitor never really died. He comes back to try to make a second stand, and this is where the 7 Paragons actually fight him, per se, or get involved. Most of the episode is the characters reacclimating to what is now the compressed universe that is Earth Prime, even as the other Earths are starting to build back out again. And we see all of these people that were previously on separate Earths. Like, one of the best scenes for me was when Barry and Kara as the Flash and Supergirl show up together to fight Weather Witch, who appears out of nowhere, and they're like, wait, you're on this Earth and you're on this Earth.
Yeah, the Flash is like, sorry, she's one of mine. And she's like, but she's like, what?
The big Easter egg of that moment is that the guy that says
Mark Wolfman,
who actually wrote Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Kind of Stan Lee-ish, don't you think?
It was lovely. I enjoyed it.
It was still lovely. Marv is wonderful, but yeah, it was kind of like, that works really well with Stan Lee. Let's get him.
But it's only going to happen this once. Cut him a break.
It's not him. It's not him. He's just showing up. It's again the
I enjoyed it. So what did we think?
I enjoyed it too. I'm just saying it's drawing from other things.
So what did we think of chapter 5?
It's like, I just love it when you team up.
Yeah, it's very cute. It's
Chapter 5 was better than chapter 4.
That's true. That's valid. It is much better than chapter 4.
The legends are always fairly entertaining.
I love the fact that they started off the episode with trying to have conversations with some of the other legends, and the running joke that actually I did watch a little of Legends post-crisis, and the running joke starts with Nate Haywood. You stop doing those crossovers.
Yeah, like Ray was like, wait, was there a crossover? Were we invited?
Yeah.
wait
the legends are so self-aware.
There's a me that's a super me.
I love him.
And Ralph is fantastic.
We got Bebo again, which,
Bebo.
Enough of the Bebo.
Bebo, he was just like...
He was kind of holographic joke.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, he's dumb. He's still kind of funny. He just reminded me of like Stay Puft Marshmallow Man Bebo.
Well, that's just
it was introducing a kind of funny, corny DC villain. So I like that.
And I liked it just because it's a joke unto itself with the fact that legends just don't take themselves seriously.
Yeah, it's a quintessential Legends thing.
Yes.
The DC corny villain is Sargon the Sorcerer. I did a lot of research because some of these were like, I should know who that is.
They're deep cuts even for most DC fans. Like we haven't seen in years and years and years.
It was a brain scratcher, that one.
It's like they took a walk at Warner Brothers Studios. They took a walk over there and were like, can you give us some people that we should put in here?
People, we got to see Stargirl because that's of course going to be a property that is coming out on DC Universe
that nobody wanted.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually didn't notice that, and then I saw a trailer for it and I'm like, wait, when did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
And why did this happen?
That's just so random. It's like the most random member of the Justice Society of America is getting her own show.
I think that's supposed to be a Captain Marvel DC grab thing, copying Marvel thing. My theory, based on what Hillary.
Maybe Stargirl isn't that old, but
this did have my saddest, most heartfelt cameo of all, Swamp Thing.
I know.
That's the very end time.
They talked
all
about
of the DC Universe live action shows had cameos. So the Titans came back, the Doom Patrol was there, and we got to see a glimpse of Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
Well, did you catch the voiceover was part of some worlds were short-lived, and that's when they showed Swamp Thing.
And ironically, sitting in his swamp, sad.
Yeah.
But it's okay because we're getting
Justice for Swamp Thing.
It's okay. We're getting a big budget Justice League Dark show with Swamp Thing, so I'm not that sad. He's gonna go on.
The guys on that Connect Grand Rapids podcast brought it up, and Kylie was like, "Oh, there's someone in our DC podcast that would be so happy to hear you say Swamp Thing."
I try to cross-reference things.
Yeah, they like
you.
So you're not the only one out there that likes the Swamp Thing series.
By the way, that show's awesome. Even though it's one season, it's worth it, and it kind of ends on a good note. Just watch it.
And if you want to help Kyle talk about it, yeah, a CPU podcast. Find us on Facebook at Couch Night on Instagram. Brandon Routh flies over the Earth in the original Superman suit in an homage to Superman the movie again and Superman Returns. We see Earth 12 and the Green Lantern Corps with action.
Ooh, that was cool. I love that.
From the Ryan Reynolds movie.
Yep.
I mean, it's still whatever. I'm just more and more because people have kind of put Green Lantern on the shelf. It's still kind of nice to see it pop up.
Well, and they knew the HBO Green Lantern Corps series is coming up, so they wanted to give that a shout out.
Yep.
Supergirl, when they're fighting the Anti-Monitor, she rushes headlong to save Superman, which is actually what she does in the Crisis comic. It just didn't end that way. I don't even know why they did that. Did we notice the crate at the very last frame of the finale?
The Wonder Twins.
I had to ask who it belonged to.
She asked.
Wonder Twins aren't there yet. So.
Yeah, the monkey is the harbinger. His biggest mistake.
Yeah. So who is it?
It's
Who
Gleek.
Well, when they did the Super Friends cartoon, all the way back, they decided they needed a surrogate for the little kids that were watching. So they have these twins, a boy and a girl.
I was a little kid that was watching.
And they have a monkey, and they're the most worthless teenage superheroes in the world who somehow sit on the same table as Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. One can turn into animals and one can turn into water.
Look, they had cool rings and a saying, okay?
And their monkey was just a ripoff of Scooby-Doo.
Okay. So that was the monkey. That
Yeah.
was
He's so negative. You are so negative, Kyle.
Hey, don't get me wrong. Smallville did a hilarious episode completely making fun of those two characters for an entire episode, and it was brilliant. I just don't think the Arrowverse writers are that clever.
Well, but I also don't think they can call themselves the Justice League, so I think that was the hint of what they're going to call themselves. So, just saying. And then you already mentioned Ezra, and you mentioned Bebo. There were two places, Gardner Pier and Perez Landing, which were shout-outs to major DC comic book writers. And then another reappearance, a resurrection that Oliver gave to this reboot. Baby Sarah now exists as a separate entity from young JJ, which means Flashpoint meant absolutely nothing.
It already didn't, but that's fine.
I know, but that was the one thing that changed. So now it's nothing. It's erased. It's gone.
trying to overlook that whole period.
Yeah, they know that they made a major mistake there, so maybe erasing it wasn't such a bad thing.
Yep.
And then the second memorial of the 4 memorials that we see are Barry, Kara, Sarah, Jean, Jefferson, Kate, and Clark holding memorial service in this hangar, which Barry informs us is a Star Labs hangar. We know this is going to be the Hall of Justice, and we see the table that he's created with each of their emblems.
They should sell those chairs.
Right?
Marketing. I love those chairs.
I said the same thing to Kyle, like, I want that whole setup.
Yeah, that'd be great for like the patio.
Right.
Be great for podcasting.
There you go.
No.
That's right. I like it. We can change heroes, or we can pick one.
Anyway, that was a fun little touch. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too.
So this is on the suggestion of Spencer. We've talked about this crossover. There were things you like, things you did. I'm leading up to it. Settle down. So 4 of you are 3-star ratings. There are things you like, things you didn't. I gave it a 4 because I guess I'm in a generous mood. What was the most satisfying moment in the crossover for you?
For me,
I kind of hit it right at the beginning when Smallville Clark Kent punched out Lex Luthor. I just love that moment.
For me, it was Brandon Routh's Superman flying over the Earth with the sun shining and the music playing. And then it has extra meaning because his chest symbol changed back, which I took to mean that in the rebooted timeline, his Lois and his family aren't dead, so he didn't go through the black. I love Christopher Reeve's Superman. I watch that movie probably like twice a month. So to see that character and knowing that, like, oh, he's out there, he still exists.
Hillary's face there was priceless.
I don't know, I got really emotional when like the John Williams music plays, and I mean, that's just such an iconic shot.
Okay, fair. Everyone gets emotional with John Williams.
Every single Superman anything with Brandon Routh for me, even more than Tom Welling. And I love Smallville. I love Tom Welling. I love his Clark Kent. But for me, I felt like they really did right by Brandon and Superman Returns, which I think has gotten an unfair shake over the course of the years.
We did not even talk about Ezra Miller.
But we did at the very beginning. It was briefly mentioned.
I mean, if you follow the news, he's probably not the Flash anymore anyway. So
yeah, I thought he was a real good sport to come on and do that, and I thought it was hilarious. It wasn't the most satisfying moment to me because
but it was funny.
It was funny.
It was funny, but apparently he's crazy in real life. So
that maybe I don't know.
That's okay. He's not a good Flash anyway.
All the Superman stuff, Lex. Anything with Brandon, the very scene you just talked about with the music in the background. Superman the movie is one of the reasons why I'm even interested in this stuff, and that was the most satisfying moment to me. I felt like they did him a little bit of justice, and they gave him kind of a chance to put closure on his Superman chapter.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna have to agree. I'm gonna have to, because I mean. Yeah, I think Brandon Routh for me is the highest point for me. Being Superman.
Yeah. I think for me, Will Wheaton, number one, and the reveal of the Hall of Justice table at the end was number two. Because that gives me a little bit of hope that even though Arrow is done, that they're going to continue doing crossovers in some way in the future.
And Marv Wolfman.
What?
And Marv Wolfman and his appearance with the characters, because it was just cute.
Okay.
I don't know if I have like a single moment. I appreciated the table and everyone coming together, but I do think that what Crisis is bringing to all these shows is, now that they're all on Earth Prime, that makes for some easier story writing. It's easier for them to come together for a crisis or a crossover so that it won't seem forced or hokey, or you need Harbinger or anyone to make it all just happen magically.
Yeah, I think that plays out better in writing, but I agree that it's nice that it'll just be easier for future storylines.
I also like that Vibe has his powers back.
Is it permanent?
I don't know. I'm hoping.
I haven't watched any of the Flash. I've finished Arrow. I watched a little bit of Batwoman, Supergirl, and Legends, but I have not watched any of the Flash post-Crisis. So does Vibe stay Vibe?
I don't know. I didn't like that he lost his powers, but I
didn't like when they took Vibe's powers away from him. I thought that was a big misstep. And as far as does he get them back, nothing of evidence that he has them back permanently to date.
Okay. Weird. How would you rank this crossover? So of all the crossovers, we have Flash versus Arrow. That was number one. Heroes joined forces when the Legends came aboard. Invasion when Supergirl came aboard. Crisis on Earth X, Elseworlds, and Infinite Earths. How do you?
I think Crisis on Earth X was my favorite. That's the one with the Nazi version, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that was my favorite of the crossovers.
I agree.
My favorite.
One?
That one.
Yeah, Crisis on Earth X was my favorite.
Me too. The villain, especially Reverse Flash, the villains were better utilized in that one. And in the fight scenes at the end, it was less them fighting CGI guys and more like real world. So it actually felt like there was like weight to the fights instead of them just punching a computer thing flying in front of them.
You actually got to see more of their abilities being used throughout the series, as opposed to them just being like, oh, I'm a paragon of
Some of the best Oliver we saw in the last few years as well.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would rank Crisis on Infinite Earths itself towards the bottom in terms of the crossovers, unfortunately.
The first half of it, I would put probably upper middle, but the second half of it does drag it down like an anchor.
Like, I think they did still have a big feat to accomplish with condensing that big storylines, and I think they did the best they could. I just still think that there's so many things they could have weeded out much better to make it stronger overall.
I would put it lower middle myself. I think Crisis on Earth X and Elseworlds were very strong. I think Invasion was pretty strong. I don't think it was I don't think it was worse than Heroes Join Forces. That's when the Legends still had the Hawks and all those people. So it was, that one was a messy one. And Flash
before the Legends found their feet.
Right. And Flash versus Arrow was very fun, but that was just the two characters, and they did that a lot apart from mid-season. So I almost don't even look at that in the pantheon of crossover as much. So probably for me, Crisis on Infinite Earths would be third or fourth of the 6.
Yeah, I would agree pretty much with that.
Me too.
Would you recommend this? So if somebody were to walk in and say, you know what, I've been hearing a lot about this Crisis on Infinite Earths, and, you know, I'm a big DC Comics fan, and I love that story. Should I watch the Crisis on Infinite Earths? Whether or not they've watched any of the 5 constituent shows, would you recommend this?
If they said they love the story of Crisis on Infinite Earths from comic books, I'd say no, don't watch this. But if you love DC pop culture, it's worth a watch.
Yeah, I would say almost like if you are a comic book fan, you probably should watch it just for... I mean, I still think it's something you should watch, but I would caution them and say that there's just certain ways that you're probably not going to be satisfied. To somebody who is not comic book savvy and just walking into it, I don't know that I would, because I think they would scratch their head and be like, why is Hillary so into this?
Nick, I haven't recommended because he's running away.
I mean, really,
I'm out.
If you're a comic book fan, it's not a great adaptation. But if you have the nostalgia, if you grew up on 89 Batman, Christopher Reeve's Superman, all these things that they're giving...
There's still things to enjoy.
There's stuff enough in it to warrant me recommending it, saying, oh, you know, you love that show. Especially like Smallville fans, if you want that little epilogue, you have to watch this.
Yeah.
The most enjoyment I got was with the Easter eggs from Infinite Earths. All of the little things, all of the appearances of, Burt Ward, that kind of stuff. They tickled my heart, so to speak. But as an overall story, as a production, it ends up falling so flat by the end that I couldn't really recommend it for anything other than those DC trivia tidbits.
I would recommend. I mean, if you've made a habit of watching the crossovers, I don't think you should avoid this one. And also, I would agree with Kyle's description. I think if you have any kind of love for this universe or set of universes or the DC Comics in general, you've been following the comic book stories or the live action stories or the animated stories, you get a little taste of everything in this. Whether the story itself is worthwhile, you'll have to kind of be the judge. Again, I'm more forgiving than the rest of the panelists, so I didn't totally hate it, but there were moments that did make me go, WTF, Arrowverse people. I don't understand why you did that, but it's still enjoyable. I was still entertained. I've watched the crossovers once or twice a piece. I may go back and rewatch this one just because it was an ambition. Whether they were successful with it or not, that's, I think, up to the person who's watching it.
Right, but your original question was if they said they really liked the storyline of Crisis on Infinite Earths. I couldn't recommend it based on that, but if you've watched the show, I would still say watch it, but not as somebody who's a fan of the storyline from the comic book, because you will be disappointed if that's your your
Yeah, if
means
you're
for going
looking
to
for
watch it.
an exact recreation, you're not going to get it.
No, not even close.
Far away from it.
Yeah. You'll find similarities with other things.
Mm-hmm. Hillary's on the record of they copied Marvel.
I'm not totally on that. I just think that on some of the biggest points they did, and that's where it fell. Because they just didn't need to do it. It's not totally no. And like I said, that just it's part of the beast. It happens. It's just I've already said they had enough that they just didn't have to do that. So yeah, it's still important to watch. Like I already said, I enjoy most comic book properties. So like Spencer was saying, for the cameos and the Easter eggs, it's totally worth it. Like Kyle and you just summarized, those reasons are important. But I would still preface it by warning them that they still may have certain reactions to it.
Okay.
Accurate.
Anything else you want to say about Crisis on Infinite Earths, the 2019-2020 crossover?
I have a question. I have two questions.
Go questions.
So Earth 2, where Black, Siren, Laurel, and Harrison Wells and Jesse Quick are from, did they come back?
They didn't say.
Yeah, we do not know. That is an
unanswered question.
Okay.
Somebody that's viewing in the Facebook live just said that Crisis was worth it for improving Supergirl alone, which there's some validity to that. It also did help Batwoman move forward. So from that standpoint, I would agree it gives something to what comes after it.
Sometimes,
sometimes
Supergirl is still dumbed down. Like in her episode, they kind of drop in and Lex gets away from her in the woods, and she's all like, "Lex, where did you go?" Like, A, she's surprised he would do that, and B, she can hear where he's gonna go. That's part of her ability. So sometimes, but yes,
I think the reference that the commenter is making though is to the show after Crisis. Supergirl and Batman
definitely
benefit from the Crisis treatment just because of how they start, and Supergirl, as we've been talking about for a very long time, has been on the struggle bus.
Yeah, driving her overarching stories, yes.
Well, they always try, and I think one of the biggest problems with Supergirl is that they've tried to make it very much a mirror of politics in real life and to push certain themes that don't particularly lend themselves to the storylines they're placing them in. Not that those themes don't necessarily have validity, it's just that they are poorly executing it.
Sure. Any other comments on the Facebook page?
I just enjoy at the end how they with the WB logo, how they put all their individual, it shifted from each of their abilities with the WB logo at the end of the credits. That's always fun when they do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And post-Crisis, all of the shows have new intros, which is interesting, and some of them, they're quite fun.
Yeah.
Not that I think Crisis necessarily made that happen. It just seems that there does seem to be a bit of a rebranding.
Like they
after Arrow dropping and them all combining to be on the same, to be on Earth Prime. They've definitely done some rebranding in all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a new chapter for the Arrowverse, if that's what we should even call it anymore. Post-Crisis.
It'll always be the Arrowverse.
I think they made, I think with the various memorials and homages to Oliver at the end of this and at the end of Arrow, he will forever be the moniker of the universe. I mean, I don't see them abandoning it. He's become statued and revered.
Yeah, I mean, he started it all, really. I mean, without Arrow, we don't have everything that we have.
It's true.
The good and the bad.
All right. Anything else that any of you or anyone out there in the Facebookiverse want to say about Crisis on Infinite Earths?
I feel like we covered it pretty well.
Awesome. Are you checking something, Spencer?
I was just looking through some of the comments. No, we're good.
All right. Well, we've talked an awfully long time because this was a mega pack crossover. But what I want to do right now is thank Nick, Spencer, Hillary, Kyle, and Kristen for joining us Facebook Live. They did that, so I'm going to do this. CPU is produced by Back Pocket Productions, run by yours truly, the Chief Couch Potato. We hail from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Please, if you like what you hear, take the time to rate us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube. Give us the stars, the comments, the reviews. Let us know how we're doing and how, what you like, what you don't. We listen to the people. We like the recommendations. It's that old chestnut. If you have suggestions on shows we might consider, contact us at our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, via email at couchpotatoesunitepodcast@gmail.com, or via our social media, though, of course, we add new and old shows to chat about around the water cooler all the time, albeit our DCTU series is one of our longest-running panels. We have several more new episodes coming down the pike, and if you miss old episodes or want to know in general what we cover, we're everywhere. You can find us on Google, any of those search engines, subscribe at our website, channel, social media, stay up on our new events and episodes. We may have more quarantine events. You just never know. Until the next time, our DCTU panel, before they reconvene, The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, and Supergirl are available to stream on Netflix through the end of their 2018 to 2019 seasons. The 5 most recently aired episodes of each show are available at the CW website and CW app. Arrow Season 8, in fact, all of Arrow is entirely on Netflix, so if you want to watch that whole show, you can. And Batwoman Season 1 is entirely available through its currently aired episode at the CW website and CW app. Plus, the CW on both the website and the app has put together the Crisis episodes so that you can watch them right in a row and you don't have to jump from one show to the next show to the next show to find Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is very, very handy and nice. In the meantime, our DCTU panel will next reconvene very shortly, in fact, to discuss the final season of Arrow and to look back at the show as a whole in part 24 of our DCTU series. So until next time, until next episode, new episodes are published every Wednesday. Keep listening, keep watching, stay tuned.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.